Hi hobby friends, let's talk about weird skin. One of my lovely patrons mentioned after the last skin tutorial video that it might be fun to look at some fantastical skin tones as well as the more usual human shades. It made me realise that although I have that now pretty old orc skin tutorial lurking around at the bottom of my channel and linked below, and I have tackled a blue Fearbold a little more recently, I hadn't really taken a broader look at fantasy skin tones, so let's do that. This is one of those learn as you go deals here. I'm going to test out some approaches and ideas and we'll see what we end up with. First chap we're going to look at is destined to be red, but I'm going to kick things off with a brown base. The thing we're looking for in these guys is to produce not just a red or green or blue tone where you'd normally find peach or umber or sienna or whatever, but to build something that is as rich and believable as natural human skin tones, but just a different hue. Over the brown, I paint in burgundy for my midtones. My brown is fairly warm, but burgundy, for a red at least, is fairly cool, so hopefully this will start building in that visual complexity we're looking for. Note, I'm covering most, but not all of the skin here. We want that brown intact in the shadow areas. Next up, we're jumping in lightness and saturation to a full red. This gets us a good confirmed red skin tone, but that slightly more natural brown undertone is doing a good job of keeping things fairly plausible feeling. Last main colour on this guy is an orange highlight, just picking out our highest upward facing surfaces. Hopefully it goes without saying that of course you can do this with a regular brush, layering and glazing your way up, it'll just take you longer. Okay, that'll do for him for now. Let's look at the green guy next. As I mentioned before, I have a way of handling your classic orc skin already that I quite like, so I want to try something different to that here. We're going to see if we can apply any ideas from the underpainting series. I start off with a pretty pale lilac pastel shade here as my base coat. And when that's done and dry, I get my midtones down with this crazy acid yellow I have in my collection. And when that's finished, I go in with some seriously thinned phthalocyanine green, glazing over the whole mini. With really thinned inks, it's very important to work slowly. Everyone's favourite too thin coats meme is maybe a little overplayed, but it does apply here. By keeping things slow and progressive, we can avoid pooling and spiderwebs, and can control where we want the green to be strongest, in the midtones in my case, and where we want that underpaint to shine through, the highlights here. Okay, we have one hell of a bright green guy done, now let's take a look at our blue guy. Or perhaps more accurately cyan, since again I'm going for something a little different to what I've done before. This guy gets a turquoise base coat, undershaded with a little Prussian blue ink, and then an electric blue applied like a zenithal over that. As a final stage, he also got just a little cool grey for his highlights, and that's the majority of the work on his skin done too. Of course, I do a quick pass on the other colour blocks for these guys as well, including some tricky, fine airbrush work, because I can always use the practice on that, and a quick pass on the metallics, that sort of thing. When that was done, I wanted to try one more idea across all three guys. Painting my Fearbolg and my orcs, I used a little trick to ease the eye into believing the unusual skin tone. I used regular skin tones. On my orcs, this takes the form of pink noses on the Gretchen and pale and pink skin tones for the orc's lips and wounds. More or less every animal on Earth we're going to interact with has red blood and viscera. We naturally associate it with living things. So the thinking here is our brain might be a little more willing to incorporate these guys in its list of living things if they incorporate a feature of everything else on the list. Now, to be upfront about it, I think the idea is workable, but the execution on these experiments is a bit flawed. I went in with this limited palette of blood and skin tones and tried them as the highest highlights and shadow glazes on all the guys, and the results were a bit mixed. If there had been some obvious scars or something like that, it might have been a bit more effective, but yeah, this one could bear a little more exploration. Before we dive into the finished pictures, just a quick reminder that if you want to support these little experiments, you can do so either by hitting the like, sub and bell buttons here, or leaving a comment below, or if you're really into it, you can join the patrons over on Patreon. There's links to a Discord server and all the rest of that below. Let me also say a massive thank you to the latest hero to join the other patron Wonderfolk, Godsmacked. Thank you, Godsmacked, you are a star. Alright then, let's have a look. Starting with the green guy, and ignoring the rush job on everything but the skin, I think we get good marks on the complexity here. Those pastel blues sell as a potential complement hue to the bright green. The flesh shades aren't doing a lot in general though, even round the back here where I tried them as scar tissue, like you see on the orcs. So overall believability? I'm not sure. What do you think? Blue Man now, and a similar story here. I tried a bit of magenta in the shadows, which is fine, but not necessarily adding anything to that believability factor. Likewise the skin tone highlights. A punchy look, but really fantastical with minimal or no grounding in my opinion. Last up, the red guy, and probably my personal favourite. Little wonder that this guy is the most sellable as a plausible skin tone, given he's on the right side of the colour wheel for it. The brown shadows are doing their job nicely, and the transitions feel possible, even the very saturated red at the highest highs. But what do you think? I have some plans to explore this further in the future, but maybe you've got your own ideas. Let me know down below and I'll see you next time.